Good morning, everybody. Welcome again to the Dome from Home. I'm Reese Barrick, your host for the morning here live at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. And I'm up here, as you might be able to see behind me. We have some palm trees and some dinosaurs. So I thought we'd come up to the diorama today. And, you know, in reality, I did a lot of my dissertation work was on dinosaurs, and we haven't really talked about dinosaurs a whole lot. So I thought maybe we'd come out here today and check out the dinosaur scene here at the Sternberg Museum and talk a little bit about the life of dinosaurs. As most of you have been in here, perhaps you've seen our Corythosaurus adult, and then we've got our baby over here. Baby, I say generously, probably this would be about maybe a 2-year-old. They grow very rapidly. As you can see, she's eating all the time. So we'll walk around here a little bit. And dinosaurs are really some of the coolest creatures in the history of the planet, because if you think about it, other than sharks, dinosaurs really have been around for longer than just about any type of animal on the planet. And what's really cool about that too is they've seen some of the biggest changes in Earth history and survived through nearly all of them, which is kind of amazing. Dinosaurs first showed up on the planet some 225 million years ago, and they didn't go extinct. That's right, they didn't go extinct. All right, many of them went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous, around 65, 66 million years ago. But as many of you know, birds are a group of dinosaurs. So we have bunches of little feathered dinosaurs around now. So in that sense, they've survived for 225 million years, which is pretty amazing. And when all that's said and done, what's fascinating, and people always talk about dinosaurs and how long ago they lived, in the 65 million years ago, 80 million years ago. And we think of dinosaurs as one single individual group of animals. But as we have in one of our exhibits here, the interesting thing is that dinosaurs, because they live for such a long period of time, that there are dinosaurs that are further away from each other than we are from dinosaurs, or from large dinosaurs. For example, we're closer in age to T-Rex than T-Rex is to Allosaurus. So we think of Allosaurs being big predatory dinosaurs, just like T-Rex, but they lived so far apart that we're actually closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex was to Allosaurus. So that's kind of a cool thing to think about. So we're up here. We've got this, interestingly enough, this large femur of a large sauropod or long-necked dinosaur, something like that. But yet here in our Cretaceous diorama, when we're looking at our Corythosaurs and our flying pteranodons, there was really not much for sauropods around. There were some alamosaurs in Texas, but for the most part, most sauropod dinosaurs had already gone extinct by the time we get to the point of where we are in our diorama, which makes sense that we have a fossil bone of a sauropod that's already fossilized, while all of our other dinosaurs in our Cretaceous diorama are still roaming around, which is kind of cool. If we sneak around the corner, we get to see our T-Rex. Hello, T-Rex. And similarly speaking, as I was just talking about our T-Rex and how we're closer to it than it was to Allosaurus, we can come over here and look and say, oh, see, we have a fossil Allosaurus skull in our diorama right across from where we have our T-Rex. And of course, the T-Rex is always a little bit scary because we have kids that like to come through here depending on how old they are. And certainly enough, holy smokes, he's on. He's giving me the side eye. All right. Good morning to you too. T-Rex is one of the most famous dinosaurs. And we've learned a lot about T-Rexes over the past number of years. But this is about a life size of a really large female T-Rex. We know females were much bigger than males, for one thing, which is kind of cool. Another thing is we now know that probably T-Rexes had some feathers, which ours does not have feathers. There's always been these arguments about what T-Rex ate. We know that they were likely very good scavengers. They had these teeth on them that were good for actually being able to bite through and crunch bone. They also certainly going to catch and kill something if they have a chance to. Another thing that's always interesting, if you think back to our, and I know I forgot to do this. Rachel always tells me I'm supposed to do this. Uh-oh. Oh, I guess I'm stuck because I started this way. I'm supposed to start with my phone rotated the other direction. But I didn't do that. So now if you're on a mobile device, you can see pretty well. If you're on your desktop, sorry, I screwed up the day. But one of the things, these large T-Rexes, is how fast could they run? And if you look back in Jurassic Park, you can see them basically walking 35 miles an hour, which they probably could not walk that fast. But there was papers actually written that said T-Rex wouldn't be running because if they tripped and fell and they hit their nose, they would kill themselves. Although we all know lots of animals that do things fairly well that if they screwed up. So I wouldn't put it past T-Rex to be able to do at the same time. Although, honestly, if they're scavenging more than hunting, do a whole heck. For some reason, we're having problems with internet up here. But one of the things we think about, T-Rexes are really large, the largest or close to the largest large theropods. But not all dinosaurs were huge. As a matter of fact, we've got a couple of little skulls here, right? So this is a very small little Protoceratops, and here's a little Orodromeus skull. So these guys are pretty small, hand for scale. So dinosaurs, even as adults, range from to really large. And that's an interesting thing because the diversity of dinosaurs keeps getting larger and larger and larger all the time. There's more dinosaur discoveries of new species in the last 15 years than there were in the whole history of dinosaurs prior to that. So more people that love dinosaurs, the more dinosaurs, and the more that we learn about their world, which is pretty amazing. One of the things up here that's kind of fun to point out is that dinosaurs started at a time when there were no flowers on the planet. There were no flowering. All right, so there were more things like pines and some palm type trees, there were ginkgos, but things like magnolias with flowers, any sort of flowering plant, were not around when dinosaurs first started out. So what they had to eat and their mechanics and what kind of teeth were very different at the beginning of dinosaur time than at the end of dinosaur time. So there's major changes in food sources, in the plants that were. Oh, here we go. We talked the other day about the earliest flowers in North America showing up around 100 to 110 million years ago, and we have some down in our collection. And the earliest flowers on the planet being around 130 million years ago. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit, that dinosaurs saw a huge change in the type of plants. Also means because flowering plants deal with lots of insects for pollination, there's a huge change in the type of insects that dinosaurs had to live with and deal with. So they probably got lots more biting insects as we went through the Cretaceous that they had to deal with. So huge changes through dinosaur time. One of the other interesting things that we think about dinosaurs is all of the earliest dinosaurs, and this is not an early dinosaur, this is a Corythosaurus, late Cretaceous, but all of the early dinosaurs were bipedal, which means they walked on two legs, right? Kind of like our T-Rex, and also the way we have our Corythosaur here. What that meant is dinosaurs, early ones walking on two legs, is they didn't walk like reptilian guys that they lived with, which meant that they could walk or run and breathe at the same time. All of our lizard friends that sort of walk and they kind of have that snake-like motion when they walk, their lungs are collapsing on one side or the other as they run. And dinosaurs don't have to do that when they're bipedal, so they could actually have a lot more stamina and energy for activity because they could actually breathe and walk or run at the same time. Then, as dinosaurs got bigger and bigger, they got to the point where they needed to plop back down on all fours. This is an interesting thing why most, not all, but nearly all dinosaurs that are quadrupeds that you see walking around on all fours, kind of like our nice dead ankylosaur over here, a quadruped, walked on all fours, became quadrupeds secondarily. And you can see a lot of our hadrosaurs, our duckbills, like this Corythosaurus, are actually in the process of sort of moving back towards being quadrupeds. This is a gigantic guy, right? Scale. Yep. Right? I'm just barely up. Not even up to his knee, right? So these guys are pretty large, and you can see that their arms are starting to get pretty long, and that in actuality these guys spent a lot of time, like this juvenile, walking around on all fours. They could do that while they were eating. So you can see even the process of many dinosaurs becoming quadrupedal because of their large size. As throughout time, dinosaurs have become more quadrupedal from their bipedal or two-legged ancestors, and most specifically the theropods that have always remained bipedal, right? And why there's plenty of quadrupedal carnivores, but not so with dinosaurs. All of the carnivorous theropods are bipeds. So that's kind of a fun, interesting thing. All right. Let's see. I'll go pick up my little skulls here. One of the things about dinosaurs, and we'll walk back this way, how large and small they were, is they filled out a whole bunch of different lifestyles and niches, and yet because they're all related, they sort of had to have a similar start. One of the things that's also interesting is that the earliest dinosaurs started out as carnivores. Generally speaking, we see an evolutionary process of things going from carnivores to herbivores. And there are a number of cool, interesting dinosaur lineages where you can actually see them evolving from being carnivorous, and through time, see them becoming more and more herbivorous. So that's another cool, interesting, fun process when you've got 160 million years of evolution of species of dinosaurs. You can see a lot of changes and adaptations as the world changed around them. So that's kind of a cool thing too. Another thing that's fun about dinosaurs and trying to figure out how they lived is that when you have animals, especially things like these herbivores, who definitely don't have any modern descendants because Triceratops or anything like that, is that how do you figure out how did they live? Well, a couple of the most important things about how an animal lived is how big they are and what their metabolism is. So if you can figure out if they're warm or cold-blooded and how big they are, you can basically figure out how much they had to eat. And if you know how much they had to eat, you can figure out how wide of a range, how big of an area they'd have to wander around in order to find enough food, in order to feed themselves, and also could tell you sort of how big their populations could be. So if you had animals that were this big, which is essentially the size of an elephant, we know how much space elephants need and how large elephant herds can get to the point where they can devastate their habitat. So these are pretty giant, and we know that had almost like rookeries. They had large nesting areas, and so we knew that there were thousands to tens of thousands of these types of large dinosaurs that wandered around in herds together. Well, we don't have thousands of elephants wandering around in herds together. But research has shown that these guys did have a stable body temperature, which means they were endotherms. They were warm-blooded, but perhaps their metabolism was nowhere close to the metabolism of mammals or modern birds. As we talked about yesterday, these guys don't have any nasal turbinates. But if you think about these dinosaurs as being sort of intermediate in their metabolism, somewhere between a lizard and a bird, you could see that perhaps things like this guy had the same dietary needs as something smaller like a bison as opposed to an elephant. That gives us a chance to figure out really how these guys lived, had to eat in a day. As a cool example, as we go back to our T-Rex over here, a T-Rex with a sort of modern bird-type metabolism would have to eat the equivalent one of these duck-billed dinosaurs every week, if not two of those. On the other hand, with a more moderate metabolic rate, if he had a reptilian metabolic rate, he could get away with eating every week. So an intermediate metabolic rate, an intermediate endotherm, means that could survive much easier as being a scavenger on something the size of our Crithyosaur, and only need to eat one of those maybe once a week or every couple, 3 days. So there's a lot to learn about dinosaurs, and it's a great experiment because they survived through such a long period of time that they saw the world change from basically Gondwana, our single supercontinent, to basically the way the world looks today, and through really dry periods to really warm, wet periods, and major changes in our atmosphere and in the plants that were around. So dinosaurs will always be some of the most fascinating creatures to me, and I think to a lot of people. Most kids love dinosaurs because of two things. They're big, a lot of them are, and they're dead, which means they really can't hurt you and you can use your imaginations, which is why some really little kids are terrified when you walk by the T-Rex and he's more than just the bones, and he decides to turn around and roar at you. But as you get older and learn more about them, they become fascinating for me. So just encourage you to realize that dinosaurs are fascinating for life. They're not just things that you learn the names of when you're between 3 and 10, but they're things that you can be fascinated by and learn a lot from and learn a lot about throughout your whole life. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Just a little introduction to talk about dinosaurs, some of my favorite creatures in the world, and hope share that a little bit with you, and hope you enjoy it. And Ian will be around at 2. I think he's talking more about Sternbergs. So until then, this is Reese. Give us a like, give us a share, and we'll be back here tomorrow morning. Have a great day.